Please welcome Glenn Riddell of the Riddell Associates, Albany, New York.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. First, I've been to this meeting because I usually go to the monthly board meetings and brief the board on what's been going on in Albany. So I have a little good news to let you know today. One of the good news is that the legislature is not in session. And that's a good thing. Because as we like to say, nothing bad can happen when they're not in town. So they completed their work at the end of June. Another piece of good news is on a personal level is on October 1st, which is around the corner, my son will be promoted to Command Sergeant Major in the United States Army. I'm very proud of that, my son enlisted on 9/11. And he's made a career out of the Army, and he's done very well. Myself, I was a Navy man, so I have no idea what they do in the Army. I can only tell you what we do in the Navy. Another good news is, some of you said you got a nice tan. That's because yesterday I sat in the Jet game, it was about 110 degrees in the ballpark, and we got kind of burned out. But the Jets actually won, which was a very good thing. And the Giants, unfortunately, are starting 0-3. That's the football news, that's the sporting news. The other thing I just want to mention kind of briefly before I start is keep the American citizens in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands in their thoughts in these next weeks and months to come. I have friends in Puerto Rico, I have property in Puerto Rico. I call myself an American half the time. And it's very difficult times right now. The very little communication I have had is pretty much devastated. There's no communication, there is no electric. They're waiting for Washington and Congress and the President to see what they're going to send down there. Right now, your thoughts and prayers are most important because nobody knows if you sent anything down where it would wind up. So they're going to be struggling for quite a while, just as they had in Texas and as we did in New York with Hurricane Sandy. I mentioned someone the other day, I live in Rockaway Beach, and this is going to be the 5th anniversary of Sandy, and we still have people that are not in their homes there for 5 years. And that's New York. I mean, and it's tough for us here. So just imagine Puerto Rico, which is economically depressed as it is, and what 3.4 million people are going through now. It's pretty unbearable for them. But I will hope that I get down there in another month or so to see what's going on. Now let me just bring up the day. My name is Glenn Riddell, and I do represent the Building Realty Institute in Albany, and on various issues, whether it's construction, whether it's insurance legislation, and whether it's co-op and condo legislation. And we do coordinate and work with Mary and Rothman down in New York City on issues that we kind of all have in front of us that impact us here, not just in New York City, but impact us in Westchester County and Rockland as well. But I mentioned at the last board meeting that I was very surprised at the amount of condo and co-op legislation that appeared in Albany this session. Because if anybody realizes, the rent guidelines issue doesn't come up again until 2019. And that's usually the year when a lot of these things start to come up and changes can take place in cooperatives and rent control, apartments, and co-ops. And things get all kind of pushed together in that 1 year. They extended that law until 2019. Very intelligently keeping it out of next year, which is election year for the governor and the entire legislature, and not have to deal with it under that pressure to either the tenants or the landlords in New York City and in Westchester and in Rockland and in Nassau County. At times we might be the tail wagging the dog, but I can tell you this organization has a pretty good bite when it comes to that. And we've made a lot of headway in limiting or stopping things that will be detrimental to the industry. I was mentioning to Jane Curtin that I lived in a co-op in Rockaway for 35 years, 40 years when my wife had it there, and we moved to a condominium. I wish I was back in the co-op, to tell you the truth. But we moved to a condominium 1 month before Sandy hit. So we kind of know what that's all about. And we also are starting to realize it's under a tax abatement, so I started to personally realize what happens when that tax abatement goes off. You know, what's the taxes going to be on my unit in Rockaway? And we found legislation in Albany that's trying to get their hands on that. Most of you know it's a city issue, but the taxes for condos and co-ops come under under the commercial tax, which is under 2, and it's at a much different rate than if you were a homeowner, which is under Class 1. They're under Class 2. And since that law has been enacted, in Westchester as well, I would imagine, a lot of buildings have been grown on the horizon in New York City that have become condominiums. And more people have sold their homes or moved into condominiums, and are starting to realize that Class 2, maybe there should be a Class 1. They should come under that. So that's something that's going to be discussed in the next few years. But just to give you some numbers, there were a total of 37 bills in the Assembly and 23 in the Senate that had direct influence over condos and co-ops. 19 of them were two-house bills, which means they were pretty serious. The less serious ones are if they were sponsored by Democrats in the Senate, because the Republicans, the IDC, control the agenda for the Senate. That's an advantage to everybody in this room. And keep that in mind as the elections come next year. The IDC is the Independent Democratic Group formed by Senator Jeff Klein. There are now 7 Democrats that sit in that conference, and they're aligned with the Senate Republicans. So there are 30 Republicans in the Senate. There is, 31 Republicans in the Senate. 1 Democrat from Brooklyn who sits with the Republican conference, giving them the 32 majority to control legislation and control the budget. The 7 IDC members make it 39, and then there's 23 mainline Democrats that are out there. On paper, you'll read a lot about it in the next few months, you'll read about it all next year, but the governor doesn't help the Democrats take over the Senate. On paper, there's 32 Democrats in the Senate. They don't all get along. So Senator Jeff Klein does have a lot to say in the budget process and what goes on the floor of the Assembly and what can pass and what does not pass. But as of now and as of next session, the Republicans will have the majority control of the Senate Republicans. And that's good for everybody in this room. Because Kathy Young previously, and now Senator Betty Little, who chairs the Housing Committee, will not do legislation that's going to impact negatively on owners of condos, co-ops, apartment buildings, rental buildings. They'll block everything they can that the Senate Democrats put out there that will be detrimental to what we have here, what you've been doing. And if that changed, we don't know what would happen because the Assembly Democrats, most of them in New York City, really drive the issue for the tenants. They're the pro-tenant person, they're the group that wants more for the tenants. Landlords should pay more, they should never have an rent increase. They got a mayor that believes that zeros are wonderful, negatives would be better. I don't know how anybody could run a building doing that, and that's what they do in the Rent Guidelines Board in New York City for the last few years, which had some sort of an impact up here in Westchester, if you follow that. And they the Assembly, the Democrats in the Assembly control the Assembly. Whatever comes out of their committees, whatever goes on the floor will pass. This year, very few of those bills that we were concerned about came out of committee. We effectively went to the leaders, we went to the committee chairs, we went to the sponsors of some of these bills. There was a bill that said they had a 45-day bill for the sale of a co-op. You know, that had to be done within 45 days, and had to do it. We pushed back on it. We spoke to the sponsor of the Assembly. He said, you know, this is being pushed by the realtors. They want this, they want these sales to be done faster. We said there's a problem with that. Not all, but with some. We don't think it's a good idea. He kind of backed off on the bill. He said, maybe you guys can negotiate something. I don't think we've ever had a conversation with the realtors on this issue, neither has anybody else. So that bill did not happen. And we met with the city people on that as well. There was one bill that was signed into law by the governor recently, which we took a position on, which related to conflicts of interest for cooperative housing. Our council, Ken Finger, reviewed it, and Dan might have looked at it as well, and said it wasn't much of an issue here. It might have been more of an issue in New York City. We didn't think it was that bad. It passed and it was signed into law, and I think this group will be okay with that. There's another bill that's sort of interest that did pass both houses, which establishes a New York State First Home Savings Program to authorize first-time home buyers to establish savings account to buy their first home, whether it be a co-op or a condo. There's always been some discussion on maybe it's easier to get a loan when you buy a house, and it might be to get a loan for a condo or to get a loan for a co-op. So there's numerous bills that try to make it balanced for a home buyer to go through the process and be able to get a better mortgage or to get a quicker approval, maybe by a co-op board or condo boards don't have the approval as co-op boards do when they sell their apartments. There was also just recently a public hearing held by the chair of the Assembly, the new chair of the Assembly Housing Committee, Steve Simberwitz from Brooklyn. Some of you may know Vito Lopez was a longtime chair of the Assembly Housing Committee and really had a firm grip on what went in and what went out of that committee for 25 years. Vito left office a little bit under a cloud and he passed away, and Steve Simberwitz took his position. And he held a public hearing on cooperatively owned housing. And just so you know, like the legislature, every year the committees have to have a hearing on any particular subject, but they have to have at least one hearing a year. So this must have, my only guess is this is the only hearing that Steve Simberwitz had put together. He put together on cooperative housing. 2 people came to testify at the hearing. And only 2 other members came to even listen to it. One was Marian Rothman, who spoke on behalf of the co-ops in New York City. And also a gentleman, which we had never heard before or met before, named Ken Jacobs. He's counsel for the Community Association Institute, which is a national organization that gave a charter here in New York in 2013. And they have common interest communities, includes homeowners, condos, and co-op association. And his testimony basically said to them, you should put the co-op and condo laws over here and take the business laws and put them over here. And you might have a better, more effective way to work with the co-op owners and co-op boards and condo owners and condo associations. So that was his input in the hearing. So the hearing was not well attended, and probably not much will come of that. What's going to happen next year? The same bills that were introduced this year are still alive next year. As I said, it's an election year. They'll be looking to have an on-time budget, which is due April 1st. And they'll be looking to get out of there in the middle of June, so they can all run for re-election, including the governor, the controller, and the entire state legislature was up for election. So you will be hearing more about that in the months ahead. Right now, they are just working in their district offices and taking care of business. But that's all I have for now, but if anybody has any questions, on that.
When we take questions, I would ask that you get up and just simply project, as we like to say in local school, project, and just give us your name, if you're on a board, and the name of your call for comment. Young lady?
Yes, my name is Kathleen Jensen Graham. I'm treasurer of the board of directors in Coop Terrace. I wanted to know what you could tell us about the 11th hour deal on the STAR for new homeowners. There was that bit of creative accounting where instead of counting it as an expense, they were able to put it in as income in the budget. And if we can expect that they will eventually move all STAR recipients to rebate by check.
You know, there was a question on the STAR rebate program that got a lot of confusion in relation to co-ops and condos and on-time reimbursements that were going back to the boards. And when it came to our attention, and then we spoke to a number of legislatures, a number of them put in legislation to try and get this STAR program the way it's supposed to be, which was the checks back the way it's supposed to be. What happened was, instead of the controller handling it, which he had in the past, and doing it the way everybody kind of got used to, and if I'm not mistaken, maybe the co-ops had to send in some paperwork or file some things.
We got it
Right. So what happened was, though, from the governor's office, they decided to move the process from the controller's office over to the tax and finance department. It took a long time for the tax and finance department to get their hands around how are we supposed to pay this. We had discussions with their top people. We told them what the problem was. They were hearing it from everybody. People weren't getting their checks on time, or the proper amount, or the proper credit, if they were supposed to get a credit. And they were really under the gun for months to try and get their hands around it. We're kind of hopeful now that they have their hands around how to do this, and it goes back to the way we were used to receiving it. So we'll know more coming up. But you know, it did take them a number of months to figure out what they were doing wrong. And input from Albert, Ken Finger, and some of the board members here, that we kept calling them, and we kept calling our elected officials, and they kept calling them and saying, you got to get your hand on this because there's too many people complaining and not getting their STAR rebate on time, either with a check or a rebate. So hopefully that's going to be smoother coming up the next time.
Any other questions? Jane?
Jane Curtis, PCAC board. What's the status of the 45-day requirement for the commissioners bill when it comes back in January? Does it start all over again? Is it still in committee?
The bill limit came out of committee. It stays in committee in both houses. So it's there. It never moved anywhere, which was a good thing. Yes.
Caesar Manfredi, Irvington, Avenue 7, President. Is part of that bill that you have to give a reason if you deny somebody?
Yes.
I think that's the more onerous part. Because once you give a reason, you can get sued for it.
No, that was part of the language that was in there, which was as problematic as everything else that was in there.
Can you repeat that?
There was a piece in the bill, part of it, that you would have to give a reason why you declined a person from purchasing the co-op, along with everything else that was in there. And we tried to look at the history because we never could figure out why Kemp Hannon in the Senate was sponsoring this bill. Because Kemp Hannon is a genius when it comes to health. He is the go-to guy, him and Richard Godfrey in the Assembly, the two go-to people when it comes to health in this state. They're brilliant. All of a sudden we noticed that Kemp Hannon has this bill, and he's catching all kinds of flack on it, and we went to him and said, Kemp, why do you, this isn't your bailiwick, it's not like you have a million co-ops in your district. What happened was, Senator Skelos, who left, you know, under his problems, this was his bill that he put in previously. So Kemp put it in at the request of the realtors, said, you know, why don't you carry this for him? He doesn't have any axe to grind with this bill. It's not like a bill that he's going to run across the room with because he's not really focused on this stuff. So, you know, he has that bill, and Chuck Levine has it, two guys from Nassau County. Chuck Levine has not made a move on the bill after conversations with us, conversation with the city, told them what we saw was wrong with the bill, and he's just backed off on it. So for now, it's where we want it to be.
Any other questions? I would like to add something to what Glenn said. When you deal with the powers that be in Albany, some of them get it, some of them don't. And we had, and this is on a personal note, we lost a superb ally in the Assembly recently, Michael Sinanowicz, who was very understanding of this industry. He got regulatory reform, he got the co-op issues, and I had the pleasure of being with Glenn, meeting him a couple of times, and you couldn't have met a more welcoming, attentive, understanding, smart. He got it. Whatever it was, regarding the co-op legislation, regarding environmental regulatory process reform, whatever it was that this industry has been concerned with. And unfortunately, he died suddenly. And so, you know, maybe the good do die young, but we lost a wonderful ally. So, you know, these are both the nicer moments and also the setbacks that one experiences. And I wish there were more Michael Simonowicz's in Albany than some others. Peg, you had a question. Just identify yourself.
You said there was 37 pieces of legislation last session that had to do with co-ops and condos.
Yeah, well.
Are all of them still on? Or is
Yeah, they're all still out there. Some of them only have one sponsor in the Senate. There's no sponsor in the Assembly, and vice versa. But some do have matching sponsors. Those are the ones that concern me more than a one-house bill.
How many pieces of legislation are you concerned about of the 37?
The 37, we probably tracked a good 12 that were very important, and we narrowed that down at the end, so there was only like 2 that really passed. So we were able to stop those in between that we didn't want, you know.
The ones that are still alive and will be handled this session?
Yes.
How many you think?
The same number, but there could be more.
Carry over.
You know, they carry over a bill is put in, it's for a 2-year cycle. So this is the first cycle, next year will be the second cycle. So the bills stay alive for the 2-year cycle before they all have to be redone and resubmitted. So we'll probably see more I guess out of the Assembly side. There's a lot of new Assembly Democrats from New York City that like to deal with housing issues and landlord issues and tenant issues. So we'll probably see some more of them. Those are some of the newer members. But the serious ones was that 45-day one that would put that on top of our list to make sure it didn't happen. And there was an insurance bill that I know we worked with our friends over here with the insurance bill, and we were able to stop that. That was a very horrible piece of legislation that had legs, and we were able to slow that down. So we just have to be vigilant. You know, every year is a different year. You know, we keep in touch with Joe Strasberg in the city as well with the RSA. You
You
know.
have one follow-up?
Yes, and for you, Albert. Since the realtors are so strong up in Albany, what can we do as CCAC members to get up to Albany so that we can support what we need to support to knock down?
Well, I think as I was telling some people at our condo co-op board meeting earlier, I don't know if you were there, is that Hagar, the Hudson Gateway Association of Realtors, and probably some people here who are members, they cover a massive territory, I think of like 7 counties in the Hudson Valley, plus since Richard Hagley, their executive officer, and I, we do communicate fairly regularly. We don't obviously see eye to eye on certain issues, but he's also taking over. This is he used to be known as the Westchester Putnam Board of Realtors. Then it became the Hudson Gateway Association of Realtors, covering a wider area. Now, Richard Hagerty just told me, because we touch base every couple of weeks on this, that, and the other, he said that now Hagar, I always think of the comic strip, but Hagar, the Hudson Gateway Association of Realtors, is taking over the Manhattan Association of Realtors. So, you know, they've got they're reaching a critical mass. Now, we also have reached a very powerful critical mass, not only with an excellent lobbying presence in Albany, but we are also allied with Marianne Rothman of the Council of New York Cooperatives, who represents like tens of thousands of units and condo boards throughout Manhattan. She, in turn, has in her alliance, which of course is our alliance, the comparable associations to hers in Manhattan with Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, and the Bronx. Very powerful. Glenn mentioned also Joe Strasberg of the Realty Rent Stabilization Association, another powerful ally. So we've got our alliances there, which, I don't know, I use the analogy since Peg asked me. Some of you might remember years ago, during the Kennedy era, when you had labor and management constantly kind of balancing each other out. You know, the General Motors and Fords on one side and the UAW on the other. And John Kenneth Galbraith, the economist at the time, called it the wisdom of countervailing power. They both kept each other in check. And this is the situation we have with let's say, Hagar, who is really our main opponent or adversary in matters related to co-op board sovereignty in terms of the policies, the way you process applications, and so we're definitely on opposite sides of the fence there. So I think the alliances so far working to a draw. And a draw is fine by us because nothing moves. There's an old saying which Glenn taught me. It's easier to fight something to a standstill than to introduce, God forbid, new ideas in Albany. Because somehow most of our representatives, Republican and Democrat, I'm not playing any favorites here, they're interested in 2 things: money and re-election. Not necessarily in that order. But those are the 2 things that most of them are interested in. And for them to get their hands around a better idea with streamlining environmental review processes, or understanding a better way for property managers to test underground storage tanks, whatever it is, it's hard for them to get their heads around a new idea. But boy, they understand votes and opposition. So it's easier to stop something than to introduce, God forbid, a new idea into these brains of theirs. Finally, Glenn mentioned other areas where, by the way, many of you are listening to Glenn and meeting him for the first time. He has been our lobbyist for easily 10 years. He not only lobbies and watches for CCAC legislation, or co-op condo legislation, but he also monitors and fights for us on the rental housing market, on the home building market, the commercial real estate market, on the insurance market, as we have a long and productive relationship with London First Insurance. So there are a lot of sectors of this building and real estate industry that he helps us keep an eye on. And anything that's deleterious or harmful, I consider ourselves very fortunate to have Glenn there up in Albany as our watchdog. Don't take this alone, as our watchdog. Any other questions?
I just wanted to say we were very strong when it was about 2011, when the legislature was really powerful. So, you know, you can't hear me.
No, that's the Westchester County Democratic Committee. They're always noisy.
But I hope we're as strong next time around as we were back in 2011.
Well, you know what? We're only as strong. I mean, it's not only this gentleman. It's not only Jeff Hanley, Maggie Collins, and myself and the staff. It is all of you that when we have to press that trigger for a clarion call, email blast, or bulletin, whatever, that we hope that you respond in kind. And whatever the request is, you know, contact Sandy Galen, or contact Richard Bugwell, contact Carlucci. Whoever our reps are on both the Senate and Assembly side, we hope that you answer the clarion call and get involved and make your voice heard, because we're only as good as...
Absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions? So listen, we have a very extensive program which Jeff Hanley has put together. I understand the next speaker will be Diana Brill. Do you want to say our chairwoman, Diana Brill of the Common Call Council?